For the longest time during the 90s and 2000s, Need for Speed has been a subject of peculiar ports, even as early as the very first game, which was released for the 3DO, PS1, and PC, with each version having slight differences such as the gameplay, graphics, story even in some cases, and this culture of different ports, content, and developers would continue on until they stopped with Most Wanted 2012. The most notable of these examples are with Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed for PC and PS1, having completely different handling and styles of content. Then after that, we got Hot Pursuit 2, which started off the black box era as they were originally only tasked to port Hot Pursuit 2. But then of course things get a little bit funky when EA decided every single title from the black box era should have a port in every possible machine. Hence why we got blessed with Underground and Most Wanted Java, Carbon PSP, Undercover PS2, and the many bizarre ports. But if I had to pick the one favorite port that is so wacky and how over the top it is, then by all means I would have to pick this one. This right here is not your ordinary Need for Speed game. The title received ports for multiple consoles. The main game, however, which was developed by Black Box Studios, was made for the Xbox 360 and PS3. However, just like the games of the past, there are other ports made by a different studio. In the case of the run, these ports would be handled by Firebrand Studios, the same studio that was responsible for this game, if you can even call it like that. But this isn't Firebrand's first rodeo with the Need for Speed franchise. In the past, they were responsible for the DS port of Undercover and Nitro, so it's not exactly a surprise the Wii and 3DS ports would be handed to them. And boy did they do a heroic job on this one. At its core, the run didn't stray too far from the original version of the game, utilizing the same story of a cross-country race with a high money count as a reward, with hundreds of participants. The major difference, however, is in the details. A lot of details. So to start it off, let's try and experience the story from the very beginning. The first noticeable thing is the presentation. It's in the style of a comic book instead of your usual CGI animation, similar to how Max Payne did it back in the day. While this can be a unique thing, in the case of this game, the art style feels incomplete or rushed. Just look at the faces, man. And the very goofy plot points. Early on in the game, you are chased by an assassin that wants to kill you. He gets to your car and throws you out, ruffles you around a bit, and just says, "Okay, let's race." Like, what? And the goofy moments in this game don't stop, to the point where we just outright get attacked by a bunch of mafia members that have a pizza logo on their car, commit heroic murders with a golf club. The goofiness does not stop with this game, and all of this is sprinkled throughout with the storyline. It just doesn't make any sense, but it's so over the top you can't stop looking at it, like watching a modern Fast and Furious movie. But what is the story anyways? The story begins with our main protagonist, Matt, waking up after his car has been dumped in the river. Then suddenly a redhead appears out of nowhere and offers him to use her car and drive them both to win the run. So your first task is to drive to the start of the race while also doing as many flips as you can, because why not? There's certainly some differences to the original game, but the important bits are still the same, except the part where the race takes place after a police roadblock, and for some reason 6 racers are just standing by waiting for the queue to go, even though there are 144 other racers that already started in front of them. The logistics here are basically non-existent. But surely now that we're in the race, everything goes back to normal for a bit. All that is until we start noticing some oddities. First off, the bottom right corner, you got the car, health, nitro, and how many lives you have. So for the most part, gameplay wise, it's not that different from the original, except the rubber band. This game has a ludicrous rubber band system. Until you're close to the finish line, just like your usual low budget racing games. Some of the later notable story moments are like when we had to commit a heroic murder on a guy in a Mustang, then somehow decide to switch cars despite the car being wrecked, followed by a super epic heroic jump over a broken bridge. Later on, you somehow pissed off a pizza parlor mafia which decided to bring a fucking rocket launcher into the mix, and you have to avoid them as part of this minigame, and a bunch of other wacky minigames. Why do they exist? Because reasons that I do not know of. But anyways, after dodging rockets, your driver heroically jumps onto a moving train, and conveniently enough, there's an empty Aston Martin 177 in it. Very, very convenient. Every time the main character loses a car, they somehow always manage to miraculously get a brand new and much faster car, which on one hand is a way to get this feeling of progression with the story, and also for vehicle variety, because unlike the original game, you can't really choose what car to drive here. So instead they decide to write in some of the most flimmiest explanations as to why we kept switching cars, and somehow later on the assassin is a buddy of yours now. If you're confused with all the different stuff that happens in the story, don't worry, that was the same case for me. Oh yeah, the redhead is also scheming, and now we're driving with this dude, before getting the surprise of being part of the FBI's top most wanted list. I guess heroic murders aren't exactly immune from the law, so there's only one way out of this: violence. And lots of it. But of course, it's time to return to a generic story where the protagonist gets his girl. We are rescuing the redhead from the mafia again, and so we embark on a final run in the Pagani, escaping and dodging both the pizza mafia and police force to win the run. Except here comes another change from the original. In the original run, the whole event is orchestrated by a mysterious figure with a prize pool of $25 million, which explains why everyone brought out cars from all ranges, including hypercars. In this version, the reward is only $1 million, which means a lot of the hypercars used here are more expensive than the reward money, and the whole event is orchestrated by the cops. Yeah, you heard that right. The cops created the run for the purpose of, catching street racers, I guess? Look, I don't know what's going on at this point. This game is just batshit insane with the story development. It moves so fast and nothing makes sense. So just like in Most Wanted, we're going for a final pursuit before setting off into the sunset with a very heroic reveal of Redhead being an important person to the pizza mafia. Thus ends the story of Mad and Redhead before they set off into the heroic sunset with a heroic romance followed by a heroic marriage and then a heroic divorce. While that is the end of the main story, this game does have some other things to offer, like the challenges, and we can also take a look at a bunch of cars in the garage option. There's also multiplayer, but did anyone actually play the multiplayer in this game? But yeah, that's pretty much all Need for Speed The Run has to offer on the Wii. Now originally, the plan was just to play this one title and make a video out of it, but during the stream, many people seem to be very eager to see a coverage of the other Wii games like Hot Pursuit and Nitro, so guess what I did? So we are continuing with this goofy odd trip, with the next game being Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2010 Wii Edition. God, that's a long name. This game is developed by Exian Entertainment. This isn't exactly the first time I've encountered them, because before this they were responsible for a number of Need for Speed ports, such as the NDS ports of Carbon and Pro Street, but my personal experience with them is specifically with the PS2 port of Undercover. So with that background, I didn't have the biggest of expectations with this game, but let's see what they have created. The menu definitely looks interesting. There's only a quick race and career here. As if we needed more confirmation of just how different this game is from the original version, the map takes place in a ton of places around the world, just like the old Hot Pursuit and something like a Burnout game. Each city contains a bunch of races, but the ultimate goal is the Grand Prix tournaments, with game modes from the main Hot Pursuit race with Cops, Eliminator, which you already know of, Time Marker, yet another attempt at a fancy name for Time Attack, and Rush Hour, which is basically Battle Royale before it became popular in modern times. They even managed to fit 99 opponents into this game mode without having the console explode. I'm actually amazed how they achieved that, but either way, you've seen enough gameplay to know it has pretty weird controls. They get even weirder with some of the item effects you can pick up from... Wait, items? So these items are called soups or whatever. They're power-ups that grant certain abilities like dropping a massive fart sound effect on your opponents, yoinking their nitro, losing the cops, and a few more, with my favorite being the cruise control. This one is straight up a cheat code, but the most important one generally is the repair power-up, because you can get damaged either visually, tire popping, or even getting wrecked and busted. The driving physics are not the only thing that are a little bit finicky with this game. The menu is pretty much just as finicky to navigate. Like the hardest hardest challenge in this game is to buy and customize cars, because you have to point and click with the cursor everywhere. Turns out you can in fact rise up the cars in this one, with some pretty interesting options too, aside from how every car only has one body kit option. But hey, at least you can change a lot of rims and add some funky vinyls using bounties, which is apparently the currency in this game. Though what about the cars themselves? Since the game separates races with different classes, you are encouraged to use different cars for different classes, with D class on the lowest and S as the highest. It's certainly a lot more encouraged with every race possible unlocking new cars, especially when dealing with the bosses. Each big city has its own boss, which you can only challenge once you complete all the events beforehand, and when you finally challenge them, it's just a checkpoint race with the whole map being open, unlike most of the other races, and just having to collect 2 markers to win. Speaking about the cities, let's check what areas this game has to offer. Starting from China, the city of Instagram influencers, Dubai, Brazil, and Las Vegas, Nevada, the only American map in this game. Surprisingly, all these maps are pretty unique with very colorful aesthetics, but with the amount of repeats you'll do, it's not surprising anyone would get sick or bored of them pretty quick. And yeah, I think that's all I can say about this game. It's fun for a bit, but it does get way too repetitive after a short while. The game certainly has some standout moments like the Battle Royale mode and some of the wacky item effects. But it's really just an okay game. If you have a Wii and are looking for a game to enjoy for a bit, not much else to say about it. Now for the next one, it's a very specific Need for Speed game with an infamous reputation for a simple reason: its choice of art style. But of course I'm gonna try and see if the game in its entirety deserves all the hate. Need for Speed Nitro is developed by EA Montreal for the Wii. Compared to the previous two, this game is the earliest, being developed in 2009, with emphasis on speed and excitement over realism or vehicle tuning. As if the goofy looking cars aren't enough indication with how much realism has been thrown out the window. For the first time, the UI doesn't feel like it was half-assed or just stamped on in a hurry, which honestly already gives me quite an appreciation to the game. So when it comes to the handling, this honestly feels like Criterion's formula from the arcadey handling to the very effective brake to drift, which for once actually fits with the aesthetics of the game, to be honest. And with the existence of a drift challenge within the career, you'll be doing a lot of braking and drifting. For the career of this game, it's actually quite similar to Hot Pursuit Wii career progression. You basically do a set of events over several countries starting from Rio de Janeiro, easily making this game better than Hot Pursuit already by starting in Brazil instead of China.
Mister, it was a joke. Can you please let me out? I haven't seen my family in weeks.
Other areas being Cairo, Madrid, Singapore, and finally Dubai. They really don't waste any opportunities with these different cities, as each got some super unique vibe and even got some interesting racetracks. The races in each area are usually split into different types, most being the usual circuits, eliminations, drift challenges, and drag racing. So I guess this game is quite similar to something like Underground when it comes to the available race types, well aside from the speed traps and time attacks. Each area has one rival to watch out for as well, because they will watch you a lot during the loading screen. They got some swag cutscenes, especially this guy from Dubai that just decides to throw money at you. Throughout the races, there's a mechanic called Own It, a unique mechanic to Nitro where being in the lead will paint the surrounding area with your graffiti tag. It's cool for several reasons, first one being it helps identify who is in the lead, and second being it just looks cool with how the environment and building change according to the rivals' color tags. Unlike Hot Pursuit, however, you don't have to clear every single event in each country to unlock the next ones by utilizing a star rating mechanic, so you just need a specific number of stars to progress. But yeah, that is pretty much the career loop, which you'll be doing 3 times in total, as the career is split into 3 different difficulties of bronze, silver, and gold. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the cars. I won't really sugarcoat it, the cars are ugly in this game with the wacky proportions. Like the rears of the cars are lifted up so much it makes them look like drag cars, and the big rooftop cuts. There's around 30 cars in total with some unique choices like the Volkswagen Camper and the Nissan Cube. The star ratings are also used to unlock more cars, but you're gonna have to buy them afterwards, so better make sure to keep winning. And there's not much when it comes to the body customization. Only one option per part, so one hood, side skirts. It also featured a livery editor. This game actually utilized the freeform editor here, and God bless, it actually looks alright. Other than that, we also got the tags, which is mainly going to be used for the own it mechanic I mentioned prior. With the cartoony vibe, you'd probably think this game doesn't have any cops, but they actually exist here as well. But it's mainly Hummer units everywhere you go, and they can be a little bit annoying at times with their attacks, of course. At the end of this playthrough, I honestly felt like the only thing dragging this game down was the drifting challenges. You would have to get a certain amount of points while also battling against the time, but you barely get points while doing drifts. It almost reminded me of Unbound drift trials where you would slide every chance you got to get some points. Other than that, this game was really fun to play. It had better pace than Hot Pursuit with some interesting directions for the cars, but ultimately a very gorgeous looking art style overall. So honestly, I don't get why it's hated by a lot of people. Yeah, sure, the cars are pretty unappealing, but overall the game is pretty solid. In fact, compared to the other two games I've played for this project, Nitro is the one that feels like it has the most polish overall. Like, the only reason this game is not considered the best for me is simply due to how batshit insane the run was with its goofy ass story. So that should be it. I'm not doing Undercover because it's just the same as the PS2 port, which I have already covered in the past. You can check it out if you're interested in what I thought of that port. But overall, out of the three games, I think both the Run and Nitro are pretty good, for different reasons of course. The Run specifically because of its story being a complete janky mess, easily the most memorable story in the Need for Speed franchise for not exactly good reasons, and Nitro for being a very solid racer with some unique mechanics and art style. Hot Pursuit on the other hand, while it is somewhat a solid racer on its own, it has a whole lot of issues from the bad pacing and the very repetitive tracks. So I definitely recommend the Run and Nitro if you're interested in some weird and wacky experiences. Hot Pursuit probably if you're curious about it, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it.